So good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to have a great panel of experienced entrepreneurs today. And I will not do much of the talking. I will really try to use the time for them to tell their journeys. Before we start, I started this last year. I have 3 questions because I'm trying to figure out whether there's a entrepreneur phenotype. So we'll find that out. So I'm just asking those 3 questions. You give an answer, and then over the time of the discussion, we can figure out if there's a rhyme or reason here. Are you an extrovert or an introvert?
I'm an introvert.
I'm exactly in the middle.
Introvert.
Now there's the team question. So you have to hire for a pretty important position in your company. Candidate A is very loyal. He's a fast learner, and he listens extremely well, works terribly hard, and really tries his best to get things done. Candidate B is definitely smarter than you are, and you'll know that it will be a challenge to manage him. A or B?
B.
Yeah, B. I'll say A.
I'm with B.
Okay, and now the bug. So if I send you today to a beach, I pay you exactly the same amount of money, or I give you 10% less money and you can keep on doing what you're doing right now. A or B?
I would, which was, I would take the money and keep on doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I've
A
tried
little
to
bit
beach, it didn't work.
Yeah, beach no good.
I would use modern technology to work from the beach.
Yeah. Can I commute from the beach? Otherwise, I'll stay.
Okay, very good. So that gives you a little bit of a taste. There's really, in my mind, not a real typical entrepreneurial phenotype. So, and also, I don't think the cliche holds that you're actually born as an entrepreneur. Let's see if that is really true, what I'm thinking here. So I will ask everybody to kind of, give a brief history, introduce yourself, and then, just give us the little account of why you ended up where today. So maybe Stacy, you want to?
Okay, sure. I'm Nancy Stagliano. I'm the current CEO of True North Therapeutics, and I called myself at one point an accidental entrepreneur. And I think that is because there is no straight line, at least in my career path. I got a bachelor's in electrical engineering. I knew I liked science and math, and seemed to be pretty good at that, but wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do with it. Always had an interest in medicine. Started down a biomedical engineering path and stopped after a master's when I realized I didn't want to be as far away from biology and basic mechanisms, and so got a PhD in neuroscience. And then decided, well, I'm pretty clear I don't want to work in academia, but I'll try to do a good postdoc. So I went to MGH and did a postdoc and continued very similar work in neuroscience, acute brain injury type of research. And then had the ability to and the opportunity to join Millennium Pharmaceuticals, which I think was really life-changing for me because, again, I didn't know really what I wanted to do. The job had nothing to do with what I studied at all. They didn't work in neuroscience, and it was a genomics company. It was in 1999 when genomics was really taking off and thought to be sort of the panacea for drug discovery. And so I got involved in every therapeutic area except neuro, and in a field that I had not any experience, and continued to just stay close to the bench, but realized that I liked leading teams, I liked tackling new problems, and I think the experience at Millennium, which for me was 4 different jobs over 7.5 years, everything from basic research to medical affairs, corporate communications, and then discovery management, just taught me that this business was right for me. It was fascinating, but I liked to wear a lot of hats, a lot of different hats, and I got bored pretty easily, got antsy pretty easily, and so it was an incredible opportunity to learn about the business of our business, and not just the science, and it positioned me well to start my first company in Santa Barbara, and that was Cytomix Therapeutics. So I was the founding CEO of Cytomix. Simon was an investor in the company, one of the first investors in Cytomix. And that is a company that just recently went public at the end of last year in October. So that was a great opportunity to learn how to raise money, initially from SBIR grants and angel investors, and then eventually venture capitalists. It taught me how to build a team, to take a very, very nascent academic technology to the point that we could get real funding and develop a therapeutic platform. From Cytomics, I took over Hyperion, which is where I met Jens, and SR1, and that was a company in need of a restart, completely different challenge, where we had an iPS cell platform, part of which contributed to by the Gladstone, and looking for therapeutic targets and new therapeutic modalities. We focused then on neuro, so I finally got to work in the field that I started in, and that was, I think, a very good success, and out of it came two things: an acquisition of Hyperion by Bristol Myers, a therapeutic target and therapeutic antibody that's in the clinic now against tau, and then True North, which we spun out from Hyperion, based on a complement asset that is now in the clinic. So this is my third company, and there was no direct line because I sort of, again, started in engineering, never woke up, said I wanted to be a CEO, that's for sure, and went through a number of different therapeutic areas. Now I'm in orphan diseases and complement system. But I guess the lesson really is that I think when opportunity knocks, I think entrepreneurs tend to open the door. They tend to take risks. I certainly did. I feel every day generally stretched and learning things all the time. So I think that's my story.
So I'm Simon Greenwood. I've actually only been an entrepreneur for 2 months, so I actually think I should be on the next panel. Yes, I'm the Chief Business Officer of a biotech, Alicos, in St. Carlos. But before that, I spent 15 years at Roche Genentech. I also have a PhD in developmental genetics from Columbia University. And I came to the Bay Area after a little excursion in New Zealand, where I'm actually from, where I was a postdoc at UCSF, and then I went to Genentech as a postdoc. Originally, I'd wanted to do academic science, and then because of family reasons, wanted to stay in the Bay Area, so I thought Genentech was a good place to build my scientific career. I got to Genentech, decided I didn't want to do industry research, so I looked for something else to do within Genentech, found business development, which is a way to manage business and science and use the different tool sets that I developed as a scientist. And then I actually started managing Genentech's corporate venture funds, Genin Fund. Then Roche bought Genentech, and that fund became part of the Roche Venture Fund. I believe that was in 2009, when Genentech was fully acquired by Roche. Became a member of the Roche Venture Fund, invested in a lot of little companies, including Alicos in 2012. And then last year decided Alicos was too exciting to not work for full time, so I made the transition to Alicos. And I think, as Nancy said, the key is, you're on this random walk, recognizing when great opportunities are in front of you, you've got to grasp them. Don't be shy to make a change if you think it's a good opportunity for you.
So my name is Martin Babbler. I'm actually trained as a pharmacist, pharmacologist. And I did that very originally because that was my weakest subject in high school. So I thought I needed to really expand my science knowledge. And I really got fascinated by science, but in the last year of school, I was in a lab on the top floor of a building with no air conditioning. There was about 100 degrees outside, and there was about 110 degrees in the lab, and I just decided that is not where I'm going to spend my life. And so I actually went on a trip around the world and trying to figure out what do I do now, and decided to come back. Well, look, I have this degree, I'll go to the industry. And it was very fortunate at the time I joined Lilly, and actually after my first year, I was asked to go to Vienna, and this was in the early 90s, just after the Iron Curtain came down. And I had the coolest job on the planet. I actually was trying to help the country managers in Lilly that had taken over these countries in Eastern Europe to figure out how we're launching the products that Lilly had in its portfolio. I had this list of 700 SKUs that Lilly had. And I could tell these people, this is the order in which we have to introduce them. And that's where I actually got really in touch with entrepreneurship, because you went into these countries and you had no clue what was going on there. There was no IMS data, there was no data to be had. You just had to go talk to people and figure out what is the market need what do you do about it? And so that's kind of where I got the bug a little bit. And then Lilly had these grand plans for me. They transferred me to Indianapolis. I decided after 2 years you get permanent damage when you live there, but no offense to anybody from India in here, but the reality is I had to get out of there. And so I joined Genentech and went from that large company to that small company that at the time had about 2,000 people. And it was a pretty amazing entrepreneurial experience, because at the time Genentech was a company where you just get things done. We had no life cycle planning. I came in not as a more senior person at Genentech, I came in as a director there, and I said, we have no life cycle planning. I'm going to put life cycle planning in place here. And I was told, then go and do it. And so at the time, you could just grab 5 other people, build life cycle planning together, put it together, and then the company decided this is how we're going to do life cycle planning. And so I had several of those experiences at Genentech. But over the years, the company grew from 2,000 people to 11,000 people. And all of a sudden, what I had walked away from at Lilly, which was a very bureaucratic organization where you needed to have 15 pre-meetings before you actually could go to the decision meeting, I just felt I need to leave again. And at that time, actually, I did go to the beach and actually went to the wine country, but realized that the complexity of this industry is so fascinating. And once you've gotten the bug of it, because it's a regulated industry, it's science, it's very unpredictable to a certain extent, especially from the biology standpoint. I want to do something again in this industry. And I came back and took over a company that was started by a very successful IT entrepreneur and a Stanford grad. And this actually taught me a lot about how to think about things and how not to think about things, because those two started the company thinking that they're both engineers and they know more than the scientists and they can apply the engineering to the science. And we discovered after 1 year of me being there, not even 1 year, that what they had put together and put in the clinic actually really didn't work. And it was because they were not willing to listen to some of the folks that had done this before. And they felt like they're going to try a new way. And there was a good thing about trying the new way because they got it done faster. But they made some very small, tiny little assumptions along the way that were basically fatal assumptions for their business model. And so we tried to save that company, decided that we would have to do a restart, and the venture investors didn't want to do that. And that's when I joined my current company, which is Principia. I was not the one who actually rounded up the money. That was done by others, at least the first round, in which actually SR1 is an investor. But since then, we've raised more than $100 million, and we have 2 programs in the clinic right now. We have technology that we licensed out of UCSF. We've built a team of about 35 people, and the only thing I can tell you there is that it's all about the people, because we have a pretty amazing team of 35 people that have generated 7 programs, 2 programs in the clinic in 5 years. And that's actually better than many large pharmaceutical organizations with a lot more people and a lot more money. So I have a great team, and the reason why I keep on doing this is because it's challenging every day, and it's different every day. It's one of the most diverse jobs that you can have. One day you're mostly spending time with people, the next with science, the next with bankers, the next with IP lawyers, and so I would not want to have it any other way.
Except the IP lawyers.
I even have great IP lawyers.
Excellent. So my name is Greg Yap. You talked about different diversity of backgrounds. I don't have a therapeutics background. I'll tell you about the company that I helped co-found, but it's a life science tools and technology company. But my own background, I left the bench a little earlier than these guys did. I did study molecular biology in school, but rather than going the PhD route, I looked at what life would be like for them, and I looked at what life would be like for consultants. And I, for some reason, picked consultants. I'm not entirely sure why to this day, but I spent 2 good years at McKinsey & Company doing general management consulting with a focus in healthcare. And then I did spend a little bit of time in venture, realized from those 2 experiences that what I really wanted to spend my life doing was building stuff. And so actually spent a significant amount of time at a company called Affymetrix, early days of DNA microarrays, bringing those products to market, doing business development and commercialization, the early days of gene expression, and then starting and running their genetics business, building that from zero, entrepreneuring inside a a larger company to bring a new business unit up to nearly 100 million in revenue. Ran their molecular diagnostics business for a little while. Decided I wanted to get into startups just before the crash, and had a good time doing it, but ended up selling the company for a very small amount of money. This was in the early days of circulating tumor cells. A company I was at various times called CellPoint, and then eventually got sold into what became Oncuity. Then I've also worked at some big companies. I ran the cancer diagnostics assay division at Roche. It was about a $500 million business. We did about 60% of the cancer diagnostics here in the US. That was a lot of fun, getting to run a large and very commercial business, touching a huge number of people. But as these guys have talked about, there are pros and cons in working for a big company. And so then from that learned and decided I'd go work for an even bigger company, and spent a little bit of time as an entrepreneur in residence at GE, the first healthcare entrepreneur in residence there. And it was a great experience, but it was intended to be a short-term thing. And then from that, had been looking around for new companies to start, and actually indirectly through Simon and a few other venture capitalists got introduced to my co-founder, who is the scientific founder of Biodyssey, where we've developed a technology that can sensitively and specifically look at protein conformational change. So we can, as you guys know, protein structural changes typically cause functional changes, and we're able to do that for the first time in high throughput and in real time. So we've developed a set of products around that. Prior to launching those products, we've been doing commercial services to build the market. And so we have about 20 pharmaceutical customers, including 7 out of the top 10. I've raised venture money for that couple of rounds, totaling about 25 million. And I was very pleased. Simon was one of our lead investors before fleeing us and going off to Alicos. So it's been a very diverse path for me, similar but yet diverse from the other groups. From the other people up here, but it has been one where up until becoming a CEO, I really wasn't sure that was the job that I wanted, and now that I'm doing it, I really enjoy it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But it does stretch and challenge you every day. It's not something, it's not something to do for the title of it, for the responsibility of it. It's something to do because you really have a vision for where you want the company to go. And you want to be stubborn and bullheaded enough to make sure that that's the way it goes, as opposed to all the other great ways that it can go.
Thank you. So I think one of the things that you face when you become an entrepreneur and you want to start a business is probably the one thing you've never learned before, and that's fundraising. I mean, that is pretty much the elephant in the room. It's one of the scariest things, but it's an absolute must, because without the money it doesn't work. So I'd like to ask you the question, what was the worst experience you had in fundraising, and what was the biggest surprise? So if you can think of little vignettes around these two themes, I'd like you to share those with us. Whoever wants to go first.
So I could start, since I was trying to raise money in 2008. That was not a good time to raise money. So the circulating tumor cell company I was at the time, I think I don't think anybody really predicted, except a small number of people, predicted the downturn that came and the challenge in fundraising. We were trying to raise money for a clinical trial for a monitoring study in circulating tumor cells. That was risky, and eventually we did end up raising the money for it after we sold the company. The next management team did, and then ultimately that trial did not work out. But it was definitely, we felt like everybody wanted to invest in things that were much earlier and much later, and so we felt like, hey, we're stuck in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I think looking back, I think we could have not anticipated the downturn in the market, but I think planned ahead for the possibility of a downturn much better. Get money when there is a time when you can get money, so that you can weather the unexpected nature of the public markets and of the late stage private markets. That's my learnings from that.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk from the perspective a little bit of the investor, but I was just talking to Martin outside the room, and there's a lot of emotion, particularly in late stage and public markets, around valuation, and they go in cycles. Sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down, and as Greg said, when they're up, you've got to be opportunistic and grab that opportunity, because there's a sure thing it's going to be down, and you don't want to be in the position of raising money in the down market. One thing, VCs are very consistent, they're always down. They're always going to be very tough on valuation and very tough on the signs. And you just got to accept that. But the thing about VCs is, I mean, they may give you a hard time on valuation, and they'll give you a hard time on your science and your business plan. But if you get the right VC, they're going to be with you for years, and they're going to be your mentor and your coach. So it's not just about the money and the valuation. It's about bringing those people around your company that are going to be there for the long term and really believe in your plan and your vision for the company. You don't want people that are thinking about something else and you're going down another path and suddenly they say, hey, I didn't think this isn't the company I invested in, and that causes a lot of friction, a lot of problems. So make sure when you invest, when you get investors, that you get the ones that really believe in your vision and also prepared to adjust as things happen, because in biotech, things happen. You know, the plan that you started with when you get the money is probably not the plan you're going to end up with when you exit.
I think actually my biggest surprise, and I wouldn't call it the worst thing, because you can to a certain extent manage with it, you really need to get to know the people you're talking to about being your investor. Because the biggest surprise that most entrepreneurs underestimate is that while everybody might be very much aligned around your idea, your company, and what you do early on in the process, as time goes on, their own priorities are changing. And my biggest shock as an entrepreneur was that most of those investors ultimately put their own priorities over the company's priorities in a squeeze situation. And what that really means is you might have somebody who's an investor that is early in their fund. They want to invest more money. They believe there's a bigger pot at the end of the rainbow later. And you have somebody who's late in their fund, and they have some pressure because they need to raise a new fund and they need an exit, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, the people actually invested in your company are totally misaligned on what they want to do. And so you become basically a herder of cats at that point in time. And you can manage through it. But if you think about, if you have a choice on how you build the folks that invest in your companies, you really want to get to know what their priorities are, all the way down to what their family situation is. Because I can tell you, I have examples where literally the lifestyle of the venture capitalists ultimately decided a little bit more the fate of the company than the technology of the company actually did. And so you really want to get to know those folks well, and before you walk into any VC's office, and before you choose who you're going to talk to, you really want to understand, what is this firm all about? What is their reputation? Who are the partners? How is the dynamic of decision maker? Is actually the person I'm talking to the person who's really ultimately making the decision, or is that actually the person who has to go to somebody else? And if that other guy actually has a company that they need to invest a little bit of dry powder they have left in, and you are basically dealing with the third guy in the pecking order, you're not going to get the money. So for me, actually, I think the worst experience really has been, not the worst experience, but the experience that was the most forming for me has been how much more you need to understand about this dynamic than you think up front as an entrepreneur. And then from a positive surprise standpoint is, if you have those folks that support you and they really believe in you and your team, while they will tell you, well, we have to find solutions, you have to think about cutting back, they're ultimately still going to be there for you. I mean, it's very rare that if there's a team that they believe in and the technology they believe in, that they're just going to walk away. Although sometimes it sounds that way when you have those discussions because they want to push the price down. They're actually going to come around. So that fear, oh, we're really going to run out of money, that's actually a really good tool for venture capitalists, but it's actually not applying that.
Okay, so I won't belabor some of the negative points, because I completely agree. I think maybe I'll come at it from a different angle. You see a lot of scientists here. A lot of the speed mentoring folks are scientists, and it may not be the most natural thing for us to sell. And I think the one thing that I was most uncomfortable with as CEO of Cytomics was selling and trying to raise money and thinking that I had to sell the science. And I think that what ends up happening on a positive note is that if there are believers like you are, and if you are authentic about what you're talking about, what you're selling, what you're building, that there are plenty of venture capitalists who share a vision with you, and that you don't need to push that hard. And obviously it's a lot of work to find those people, but once you do, I think that's a very comfortable place when you're trusted, when the belief in the science that you're bringing to the table, that you're offering and you're trying to promote is very unique, is supported. And I think that was a very interesting experience for me, because I didn't know whether people would get it. Cytomics was a platform, it was unproven. Each of the companies that I've run had different challenges, have different challenges, but eventually, again, if you've come from the science and if you communicate, again, in an authentic way and are honest about the pros and cons, honest about what could go wrong and what keeps you up at night, I think there are very, very strong investors and thoughtful investors out there. So that was a very nice, maybe surprise in the beginning, and certainly now it's a comforting aspect of the business.
So I think, one of the lessons, especially if you start out and you're in a startup company, I mean, your money has a face. I think you should not forget this. It's not just a green little piece of paper. So really understand who's behind this face, because it's going to be very important. The other faces that are extremely important for you, besides the money faces, are your team members. Again, I'd like to have a little narrative on, your philosophy of how you build your teams. And again, maybe something that worked very well and something that really was a disaster.
I can start. So back to your question, Jens, your original one, a person who's smarter than you versus a person who's loyal. I think a good, healthy mix of that, it makes for a great company. I think certainly if you have a person who's smarter than you that's easy to manage, that would be great. And I think that one of the things we have to acknowledge as CEOs, especially early in our careers, that we don't know everything, and we're not expected to know everything. And so what I tried to do is educate myself with consultants when I was able to hire people that had more experience than me, for sure. I think the one thing that you have to recognize, and it may be unsettling to investors, is that you just can't take yourself that seriously. I mean, you cannot know it all. You can't have done it all. And so having the people around you that have experiences that you don't, I think is critical. And I think it's important then to communicate regularly a vision. And I think what's challenging is we have 16 people at True North. We're in the clinic. We have a lot of consultants. We have a lot of people that aren't on site. And I think it's very important to make sure that your expanded team knows where you're headed, understands the pivot points, understands the strategy, and it takes a lot of time, right? It takes a lot of time to invest and have those conversations with people who aren't getting coffee with you every morning, et cetera. So I think there's a combination of choosing people that you believe in, but then also continuing to kind of nurture and inspire those people, because everyone's very, very busy. This business is very intense. The timelines always seem to be shorter than reasonable. And so as long as you keep people aligned and understanding where you're headed, then the management of the whole group becomes easier.
So one thing that little companies tend to overlook often when they're starting up and everyone's excited is company culture and the environment. And the CEO, seems to often, if you're a startup entrepreneur, you're going to say, well, everyone believes the same way that I do. And that's not true. And in a little company, you have 15, 20 people. You have a couple of people that are thinking differently and behaving differently. That's going to be very disruptive. And culture comes from the top. I had the privilege of being at Genentech when Art Levinson was the CEO. I mean, his values, his ethos, what he believed, disseminated through those 10,000 people. And that was a very, very powerful thing. And when you're a CEO, you have the opportunity to set that culture within your company from day one. Don't wait until day 90 or when you have some problem. Be proactive and think about your culture, how you want the company's values to be, what you want to do with vacations, whether you want to have vacation days or not vacation days. No, not looking at anyone in particular. But, making sure that everyone fits the culture you're setting up. And when you're hiring, are they going to fit within that culture, or are they going to be unhappy in that culture? Just don't assemble a random collection of people.
So I agree with everything that's been said. I think for me, one of the key learnings here has been that you tend to see that less experienced folks often hire people of the same ilk and the same personality type. And I think what Simon just said, I think one of the things I want to add there is great functioning teams actually really have a very diverse set of personality types. And so be very careful that you don't mix culture with being all the same or thinking all the same. It's really about getting the diverse people to talk to each other. It's always good to have that one person who cares more about how we're all feeling. On the other hand, having somebody in the team who says, let's get this done, let's get this done. or somebody is analytical, or you know, the clown. You need all these people to have a good team, and really make sure that you think about that. So for me, actually building a team, when I actually looked at my initial team, that there were 3 people who were already there, and we hired a couple more, and about 6 months into it, we looked at it, and we realized, wait a second, we are 60% this type, and 40% the other 3, 4, 5, 6 personality type, depending on how you look at it. And I said, we actually have to pay attention to that. And then the other piece for me is really, is the concept of, I said I would hire B, but we also have this rule that I have basically borrowed from somebody, and sorry to use the word, but no assholes around here. And for me, this is really important. We actually have let people go. They were scientifically extremely strong, and they were fantastic in their technical skills, but they did not know how to treat other people with respect. And we decided, these are our values, and we're going to stick to these values. And we actually have let people go in our company because they didn't adhere to the values. And I think it's extremely important that when you make those statements as leader, whether it's the CEO or anybody leading a team, and you agree that these are the values, you have to stick to them, because otherwise all this stuff goes out the window and people don't understand who you are as a company. And I think actually getting that identity, especially in a startup, is extremely important, because if you're cohesive, you get way more done. And it also contributes, in my mind, a lot to how well can you debate versus how much is actually just people say, oh, well, I was told to do that, and then something goes wrong, and they're like, well, I was told to do that. So you can't hide if you have good debate, and you can't hide if you have a very cohesive team.
Yeah, I'll build on that a bit, but I think both of the last comments, because I think there's a natural tension between, you need a diverse set of experiences, a diverse set of perspectives, right, in order to succeed, but you need a unity of purpose, right? And so when you have a diversity of perspectives, it's very easy not to have a unity of purpose. And I do think the thing that brings that together for me, right, is the company culture and the company values, right? You know, Simon and I were the ones who talked about the vacation days, but one of the things I really appreciated about having Simon involved as one of our lead investors was that he was the board member that I leaned on, and I think you should have a board member that you lean on, that you can talk about these things with. I'll be honest, not all of my board members actually cared about company culture, right? It's not all for them, it's not always important. But we did invest quite a bit of time in thinking about, and it was important to me that even though my responsibility is to articulate that culture, I felt it was important to get a lot of feedback and to include the folks who were with me in the early part of that journey, in terms of setting forth and codifying that culture into something that we could then use as our unity of purpose. And I think that's been very helpful to us, because you do have times where things aren't going well, or something goes wrong, or somebody makes a mistake, and and other people have to pull together to keep the group going. And if you don't have that unity of purpose, right, then you can get fragmentation, then you can get people pulling on different oars in different directions. And in a small company, you know, every person is a meaningful percentage of a company's total productivity, right? And you just can't have any of that productivity being wasted, right? And so for us, you know, getting our product to market in, you know, as a CEO, setting a slightly unreasonable target, and then expecting a high-functioning team to get there, that can work, right? If you don't have that trust, if you don't have that unity of purpose, you know, that kind of thing will wear on your team. And I've had that happen to me in earlier parts of my career, and you know, hopefully have learned from that now and invest more time up front in trying to build that unity of purpose through values, through culture, through shared experiences, that when the times get tough, which they always do, that you have that to rely upon. You have that reservoir of goodwill to rely upon when things go bad. And I think that's, you know, the most important asset of any company is the team.